So let's talk Hellraiser, okay? This is a series that I know we both really appreciate. Um, we're going to be talking today about the first three movies. So Hellraiser, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, and then Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. And the very first thing I like to say about that is I hate it when they change naming conventions. I wish they would just keep one thing the whole time. But that's okay. These first three movies, I spoiler alert, I kind of liked them. We'll get more into that. Actually liked these three a lot. But just a quick intro, on all of this. I think the best way to start is what is our experience with Hellraiser as a franchise? Did you want to go first on that one?
Sure. Hellraiser is probably my favorite horror franchise ever created. Um, I'm a big fan of Clive Barker, not just the Hellraiser series, but most of his writing, his books, his movies, they're all phenomenal to me. Um, but I watched these movies when I was probably a young teenager, is probably when I watched the first one.
Mm.
And then I proceeded to binge watch all of them multiple times throughout the years. And then again for the show. Um, but definitely drove a lot of my writing inspiration, in the sense that Clive Barker builds these large worlds hidden beneath a veil and kind of just throws little hints at you the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely the way I've learned to write horror.
Mm-hmm.
And he just creates such phenomenal creatures. The Cenobites are just probably some of the best creature creation I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the movies are kind of bad about it. Number three, there was some questionable Cenobites, but but Pinhead himself, it, and the actor who plays him, which what was his name? I'm trying to pull it up on my list
Bradley
here.
or something like that. I think it was it
Doug Bradley.
something like that. I had it up.
Um, he's a phenomenal Hellraiser, and I'm kind of disappointed that it ends up changing actors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, so it's basically just my favorite series of all time. The books are superior to the movies. Both books are, though I recently found out that the second book is like this whole other additional universe that I wasn't aware of connected to another book series.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far the rabbit hole goes yet, but I will find out as soon as I can find them all at the library. So,
Mm-hmm.
which I have a lot of finds at the library. I think I had like 70 books during lockdown. So, yeah.
Uh, yeah, so my experience is I went to a Hastings, rest in peace. At least the one that I went to is now closed. And I found on a clearance rack a copy of Hellbound Heart. And I picked it up and I was looking at it and the cover looked so interesting. Um, and it was Clive Barker, and I knew my friends had read Abarat. I had never read Abarat. But I recognized the name and I was like, huh, I should check this out. And then they're like, oh, they made the Hellraiser films after that. And I was like, oh. I mean, I was like in high school, circa 2007, 2008. I'm aging myself. But
I was also in high school.
yeah, no, because we're like right around the same age, right? But I picked it up and I read it because it was a short book. It was in a relatively easy read. Not to say that it wasn't mentally stimulating, because it was. And I really enjoyed the book. And then I watched Hellraiser, and I watched one and two first, and I really liked them. But I never got around to watching three because finding a lot of these on streaming services has been difficult, and they're not streaming for free. You can rent most of them through Amazon Prime, just to educate anybody who's looking for these. But some of them you can't even find on Amazon Prime. You have to go to other places to rent them or find them.
They're as obscure as the puzzle box.
Yeah. And for some of them, probably for good reason.
True,
But
true.
I will say, I really liked them after watching the first two, after I read the book. And then I even watching all of these, my appreciation has grown. I like it a lot, and I think I can honestly say it's one of my favorite horror franchises. Period.
You should check out the comic books too. It
I
gets even better.
I want to. I really, really want to. Just finding copies of them though was like they were kind of some of them were kind of expensive. And I was
Oh,
trying
for
to
sure.
find them on Amazon and like I haven't checked Thrift Books yet. I hear that that's not Thrift Books is not sponsoring us, but Thrift Books, if you want to sponsor us, I will thrift your books and talk about them on stream. That would be a
Oh, for
great thrift
sure.
stream,
We will change into a book club show.
right? But yeah, I up till that point, like came into the series in such a weird way because really the Hellraiser, the original films and stuff, were kind of like came out at a point in my life where really I wasn't watching horror films because I was too young. Was I occasionally probably catching a horror flick at that age? Yeah, but these I didn't get to watch at the time they came out. It took me a little bit of time.
I think they were all on Netflix back in the day.
Oh, really?
Hmm. Because I remember just cycling through them back in the wild days of Netflix where they got licenses for everything. And now they're just trying to push all their own crap out.
Yeah, yeah. Some things pretty dang good. Some things just missing the mark. But
Right?
that's a discussion we could have. But so that's our experience with this series. You know, by any means are we experts in the films and horror? No, but we're lovers of the genre and lovers of the franchise. So, you know, you want to hear someone break it down, you could find better people that could do all that. But here we're going to talk about it from people who love the franchise's point of view. So,
Exactly.
all of that to say, Clive Barker, his mind is the one that created up this world. This sort of little book that is Hellbound Heart that inspired. I counted it. It's a 10 movie franchise. 10 movie franchise and an additional book, and
And
then
it's much
comics.
better than the Friday the 13th franchise of
Yeah,
equally numbered movies.
it is. It does when you pan it out. I mean, you know, some of the movies are kind of on the side, but they're better than most horror franchises that have that many that are input into it.
And Clive Barker himself is such an interesting person because he's only allowed to put so much of his horror style into the movies
Hmm.
because they have to be able to be shown to people in theaters. But he's a
Absolutely.
very, I don't know really how to describe his writing. I guess it's like lewd, lewd, sadomasochistic horror.
Yeah.
And both books portray it in such a way that the movie fails to capture, I feel like.
Hmm.
But at least the first movie did better job than the others.
And when we look at it from that perspective, truly, the first movie was the one he had the most hand in. So I mean, that feeling, you know, to your point, if he made it exact, I mean, obviously horror doesn't work the same way in a movie that it does in a book, right? But the sort of things that I think even the first Hellraiser did for the horror movie genre, there's ways that it changed the genre completely. I think, and
Definitely.
and having opening this door to a whole franchise, Clive Barker's hand in that first movie truly is what cemented that. Because not only was he the writer, he was also director.
Yeah. And it was kind of disappointing that he didn't have a bigger part in the other movies. I
Mm.
know that at some point recently he started to get the license back to make more movies. And I don't know I don't remember if he was in part in making the newest one or not. Was he?
I'm not sure. I didn't research that deeply into that
We
newest one.
we have
Yeah.
a few episodes before we get there.
Yeah, exactly.
But for quite a few of these movies, he has no part in them at all.
Mm.
I think the last one he's actually involved in is number three.
Mm.
Uh, And then after that, it's just kind of other people building onto his world,
Mm-hmm.
and doing it in a way that he was definitely disappointed with.
Yeah.
And the way he builds his worlds is an interesting way of interconnectivity
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of see with Stephen King as well. Um, so I'm a big Stephen King fan. He's, I guess, in terms of writers, it goes Stephen King and then Clive Barker, but all of Stephen King's world books are connected, back to their Dark Tower series.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, Clive Barker's other theories gives a sense they're all connected back to the same hellscape that Pinhead and the Cenobites are supposed to come from. And so to have other people building onto these worlds eventually seemed like they were, changing the dynamic completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have read now at this point two Clive Barker books because I read both books that attach to the whole Hellbound Heart. I read Hellbound Heart and then I read the Scarlet Gospels. And just that kind of world building is so amazing to me. The fact that Stephen King does it, the fact that Clive Barker has at least started this with the Scarlet Gospel, and I don't know the connections with his other books, but it's really really interesting. And one of the things that interests me the most about this is if you look at Hellbound Heart and the way it's presented, and you look at the first movie, which we're gonna segue into, the connection. You look at like things like the focus on Pinhead himself. It just wasn't there in the book or even in the first movie. Yes, he was there, and yes, he had lines, but there were other Cenobites also carried like plot points and were there and were talking. And as you see this sort of go where you no longer have those other Cenobites you had in the first couple of movies or 3 movies or something like that, and they start using others, making other Cenobites, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, because at some point, the lore is laid down that these are people. They were people at some point. Um,
Now that does get strange with the second book because Pinhead becomes something that's not quite portrayed as like the other Cenobites.
mm-hmm.
But
I don't know if we're gonna put the book talk at the end with like really dig deep into these books, but I feel like we could spend a full hour on each movie and talk about it in depth and compare it across the board. But
definitely.
so all that to say, I think stepping into the first Hellraiser movie and high level plot. If you're not familiar, I highly recommend this movie. I'm jumping ahead of myself by saying that, but truly I do. High level plot. Let me see here. I wrote some notes for me so I could remember everybody's names because I'm bad with names. I'm gonna admit it. I'm a terrible with names.
I've got the IMDb pulled up.
So, a guy named Frank. Now, what was his last name?
Not Castle. That is the Punisher. It just says Frank on the IMDb.
Frank gets this box. He's this guy who normal sexual encounters do not excite him or keep him interested. So he gets this box that's supposed to be the ultimate pleasure. You're supposed to get the ultimate pleasure from this box.
Have you seen the show Cake on Hulu?
No.
Just go watch that show and then rethink what you said, and you'll understand like his whole demeanor.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it.
Okay, I'll put it on the list.
There's just a whole there's a whole skit about getting rid of your feelings of being tough. And so you don't feel anything from sex or anything else because you gotta be tough. And it's definitely the demeanor that Frank gives off is like this bad boy, tough, I'm better than everyone else vibe.
Yeah. Frank is this sort of he's one of the villains of the story, and the main villain, I don't know, I question whether to say that or not, but
I think he was just misled, so I wouldn't say the main villain. I would say Julie, not Julie, the mom.
Julia.
Julia.
So Julia is married to a guy named Larry, and they move into this house where Frank's done this ritual, opened this box, and summon the Cenobites. This has all happened in the past by the time they've moved in, but we find out that Frank never. He's been sort of transported to this other world, but found a way to kind of push his way back through. And he first gets his first glimpse in when Larry accidentally hurts himself, gets blood everywhere in this room where Frank did the ritual. And that slowly begins to regenerate Frank. Julia goes on. Julia was a lover of Frank's. She starts bringing in people, men that she kills so that Frank can take their life force and energy and skin, and eventually ends up killing Larry, and Frank takes his skin. Frank and Larry are brothers. So I guess maybe their bone structure is similar enough that worked. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but what? So do we want to talk about how this first section is so drastically different from the book, or we want to wait? Because I feel like they missed with the ritual with Frank. The whole purpose of it was missed. But
Yeah, let's finish. Let's talk a little bit about Kirsty before we get there.
okay,
So Kirsty is our final girl in this movie. Kirsty is, I love her. I don't know. I don't know if it was this first movie and then compounded with the rest of the story. I don't know. I love Kirsty. Kirsty is Larry's daughter, Julia's stepdaughter. And Kirsty, through this whole thing, is basically trying to save her father, realizes that Frank is now her father, goes through this whole thing. The Cenobites come, she opens the box and the Cenobites come, and she tells them... I'm muddling it up because I'm trying to go very high level here, but basically, story is Kirsty opens the box, leads the Cenobites to Frank. They take Frank back after Kirsty almost gets killed by Frank and Julia and by the Cenobites, and it's a whole thing. But anyway, story ends with Frank being recaptured by the Cenobites, and my favorite scene. I'm jumping ahead. I'm not supposed to talk about my favorite scene yet. So I'll hold on to that.
that's what I was checking. I was like, oh yeah, we have an itinerary.
So basically, this whole thing is Frank's hunt for pleasure is what ultimately got him into trouble. And we see Kirsty as this character who she inadvertently summons the Cenobites, and she leads them back to Frank.
Yes, and she does it in such a clever way compared to any other survivors from other horror movie franchises.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes her so much more likable to me than other survivors' characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because realistically, the Cenobites are intelligent enough that they shouldn't have been so easily tricked, and it makes you feel like they're just like, yeah, sure, whatever, we'll just go along with this.
I think there's also this sort of, at least when you watch the first couple of movies, where it's like they almost go easier on the innocent party. And we're sort of led to view Kirsty, she did trick them, but she also was not intentional in her summoning. She was not intentional in what she did.
Yeah.
That changes largely through the lore of these movies. Someone who's innocent, who is just somehow, like, adjacent to everything that's happening, gets punished just for being adjacent. Later on in the movies. In this movie, we see this sort of setup of, oh, you're innocent, and then later on they call into question things like, but you're always just innocent and just here and just didn't mean to do it or be around when it happened. Like, come on.
Yeah. I think they just get more cynical. Maybe the Cenobites just become Cenobites. I don't know.
Cynicalobites. But yeah, so what were your favorite parts of this first movie?
Definitely the opening scene. I kind of liked the slow build with Frank discovering the puzzle box and being warned about it.
Mm-hmm.
It is, of course, a problematic scene, as it kind of portrays the Asian community in a stereotypical light,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that Gremlins does.
Mm.
But
It does have a Gremlins vibe. You're exactly
yeah,
right.
another great movie. But that's a Christmas movie, so we gotta wait.
You gotta watch that with Die Hard because they're both Christmas.
They're probably the same universe too. Who knows? Um, definitely that, and kind of Frank. Even when I didn't have the full book background knowledge, still Frank kind of discovering the box and learning how to solve it and how much determination he had the entire time. Um, and then just the sudden abrupt surprise of what he actually got himself into. So definitely the whole opening scene, um, which then after I read the book, of course, I was like, whatever, this is all a lie. But then um, I also like the scene, or is it the scene where she goes into the storage room and finds the head in there? Is that correct? Not the head, with the shawl glowing, and then the Cenobite rises up. I believe
Oh,
that's the first one.
yes. I've watched so many of these movies.
They
Everything's
all
blending
bleed
together.
together.
Yeah, definitely. If that wasn't this movie, that was an amazing scene. Anyway. We so I'd have to say my favorite part is the Jesus wept when he at the end is like hooked. And when I first watched that movie, I was
He
like,
explodes.
yeah, and like he's hooked and his face is all like stretched out, and he looks her in the face and with like bloody mouth says Jesus wept. And when I first watched it, I was like, that was weird. I don't get it. Why'd he do that? He never said that before. I don't understand. The second time I watched it, I was like, that was dope. I liked that. More of that.
They go pretty hard onto the body horror and stuff like that in the later films. Because I think that becomes the driving point. Because it was the only film series that really had that level of like hook and chain body horror. I guess Texas Chainsaw kind of did in some scenes, but it wasn't like the general theme. And obviously, I love hook and chain horror, so um, but that is an amazing scene. And of course, I think actually my favorite scene is just when he says that he'll tear your soul apart. Just the perfect way he delivers that line every time.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to try because I can't do it as good as that actor can.
Yeah.
But it's spine tingling every time.
This movie did have some pretty good acting. Like I was impressed with the acting. As far as like when you horror movies go, you always got to give I I say this as a horror movie fan, you always kind of have to give a little bit on the acting. It seems like with most horror movies. If you get a well acted horror movie and you can totally immerse yourself, I felt like I was immersed in this. I didn't have moments where I was like, that was terrible acting. Like that was fake as hell.
No, definitely, I agree. The acting in this one was superb. It goes downhill, but like as we go on. But this one is probably my favorite out of all of them for
Mm,
sure.
yeah.
Um, and weirdly enough, the Bloodlines one is my second favorite, which everyone seems to hate because of the time jump.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's a great one.
It's good. Also, there's a lot of really like well-known cast in that movie as you're watching it and you watch back. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves because that one's for next episode.
Okay.
So that's our favorite parts. What about least favorite parts? I don't know if I had any least favorite parts in this movie.
Yeah, I didn't really have any least favorite parts in this one.
Mm.
Um, the only, I mean, there's just the disappointment, like I said, about the mismatch of the opening. That's it. That's really it. This movie was great, and you get like the secret dragon ending. It's all great.
What secret dragon ending? What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
at the end, the dragon comes down and gets the puzzle box out of the destroyed house.
Oh yeah. Yes. Uh huh. That was yes. All of these movies are running together for me. I thought that was
Okay.
much later. So this is the establishment of the cinema lore. This is the establishment of what we see. And I know we've already kind of talked about how some of that lore has changed as far as like the Cenobites being like, oh, you're an innocent party. You know, it's not really like you're this kind of person who's seeking out the ultimate thrill and needs this box to do this. But the establishment of that sort of ideology that you have pushed the boundaries of what human desire and need should be. Now you've stepped into this realm of be careful what you wish for, basically. You know, you've reached that point where pain is pleasure. You will be tortured in a way that can you connect the pain and the pleasure of it? Like, can you do, like, is that possible for a person to do? For a person to really accept in that way? So all of these kind of things, this lore is set up. What are some of the key points for you that this movie set up for cinema?
Re-ask me the question.
So the
in a different format.
The lore. So the lore of the movies, right? What are some key, like, what is the foundation that's set up by Clive Barker in this movie of the lore that comes to be the puzzle box and Pinhead and all of the things that it becomes?
Yeah, so in this first movie, you actually only get small snippets of the lore. So you know that Frank, as you've already said, is seeking a thrill beyond what he's experienced in real life, in his life so far. And this search has taken him to finding something called, I believe this one is the Lament Configuration Box.
Yes.
So the Lament Configuration is kind of mentioned offhand in this movie. It's not really gotten into. So he sets up this key point that there's something known as the Lament Configuration, and if you figure out how to get it into the right order, you'll be able to open this gateway to what is told to you to be ultimate pleasure. And yeah, so the movie wise, sorry, I was getting stuck on that book scene again and the way it was different. But no, because it portrays it that way later on. So the connection is they portray Frank just dying and feeling the pain of what happens. And what's happening is described in the book, which is hard to describe in a movie. Is that he's experiencing every feeling his body is able to allow him to feel. Literally every nerve, every piece of skin, every small piece of him, everything is hypersensitive. And it's basically a torment upon his senses. Quite realistically, they give you exactly what you asked for, like Marlo said, an ultimate pleasure that ends up being so overwhelming that you can't take it anymore. And then you wish to be destroyed, and then that's what they do. In the book, in the movie, Frank's blood is left over, and that's what's portrayed as the reason he's able to come back. Some of his DNA has been left behind, which is not usual for this kind of thing. You see later on in other movies that gateways are usually open. Is it the second movie with the bed with the pillar, or is that the fourth?
Yeah, that's the second movie where that happens, because they kind of, in the third movie, they're kind of stuck in the pillar, but it looks different in the third one.
Yeah. So you see gateways opening like that. So this is the first time that, and you find this out through book thought, this is the first time that any kind of substance has been left behind. In the book, it's semen. In the movie, it's blood. And this is what allows Frank to come back. And so this also establishes the lore that if you leave something behind of yourself and are able to rebuild yourself, you can escape the Cenobites. And it's portrayed that anyone who solves this box is subject to this fate. And it also portrays that the Cenobites can be escaped and they are unaware that you can escape from them. And that's the way that Christy Kirsty or Kirsty tricked them in the first place, right?
Mhm.
Is that she makes them aware that Frank escaped them and her dad is not who he appears to be, right?
Right.
His face moves,
Mhm.
Night Mother style.
Yeah.
So, and once again, inspirations for things. But yeah, so that's basically the only lore that's established in
Mhm.
this movie. You know that Pinhead is a Cenobite. He's not really even addressed as this. That's kind of a fan name that's given to him
Mhm.
at that point. Um, and there's two other Cenobites, one of which you don't see very much of again, which is the other AMAP appearing one.
Mhm.
Um, the one I believe you see the one with the open throat, which I forgot all the Cenobites' names.
Yeah.
They are all named.
Yeah.
I will have a list for next episode compiled. Um, and you get the sense that in the first movie, you get the sense that these are the only ones.
Mhm.
You complete the box. Pinhead and his two lackeys come through. They follow you around all sketchy as you run through the house, and then they tear you apart with chains.
Mhm.
Um, but outside of that, that's pretty much all you get from the
Right.
first movie.
Yeah, I
I
think
probably deep dove there.
I think that's I think that's a really fair assessment. I don't know that there's anything else that I could think of that really is kind of set up by this first movie. Um, but yeah, talking about the difference with the beginning and how in depth and like how much that Frank was feeling in that first scene. I had really forgotten from my first read through to the second read through I did of Hellbound Heart because I read it again just because I'm that kind of person. Um, Reading it through that second time, it's jarring even to this day where like I feel like a lot of media is meant for shock value. A lot of the things that you see in movies and in books and in television are meant to shock you. And that was still truly like something that I was like, dang, this book, dang.
Yeah, Clive Barker has a very intense way of writing and displaying his horror both through extreme detail and, like I said, making everything erotic in a certain way.
Right.
It just means erotic, isn't it? Which
Yeah, that's sort of like
I
horror eroticism for sure is.
recommend. I recommend the Damnation game to read next to kind of connect some more of this world together.
I'm gonna check it out.
But it has the same effect as why I brought it up. Sorry, I seem to get sidetracked here for a second.
So another difference, but I was going to bring up between the book and the movie is the relationship of Kirsty to the figure that in the movie is Larry, but in the book is Rory. So
Mhm.
Julia is there; she's the same. She is married to a man who is Frank's brother, but in the book his name is Rory. In the movie his name is Larry. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
And in the book, Kirsty is not that figure's daughter. She's not Rory's or Larry's or whomever, Larry,
Mm-mm.
whatever you call him. It's not his daughter. It's his friend who is in love with him. And moving through all of this, you kind of get this idea of Kirsty in the book as a very plain woman. She's not, as the book describes her, a very attractive woman. But Kirsty is this final girl. She is the epitome of a final girl. She's
Mhm.
pretty. She's fit. She's all of the things that a final girl is almost always in any of these movies. Other than that, the movie is pretty true to the book. I mean,
Mhm.
there are pieces that are missing, and I think when Clive Barker wrote the screenplay, that was his thinking. I can make this as close as possible, but not everything translates, And
Yeah.
you would take a lot of extra screen time to set up this sort of relationship between Kirsty, if Kirsty was not the final girl character and more like she was in the book. It would take time to build that kind of relationship. And would people really
Yeah.
root for a kind of average girl? I don't
Not
know.
in 1987 when this came out.
No.
And you kind of see Hellraiser is definitely a franchise that changes with the times that it's coming out.
Mhm.
it shifts the kind of horror that it does, and it shifts the kind of villain that it has Pinhead be,
Right.
to kind of match the the current layout of horror movies coming out in the year that it's being written.
Right.
Um, but you're definitely right. It would have taken a lot longer to do character development that way between those two characters.
Right.
Um, and and even the relationship between Frank and Julia, it's just in the movie portrayed as this raw sexual relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that's really gotten more in depth in the book as well, that they would have to take way too much time to do. I
Right.
think the movie portrayal did a good job. You want to give it our rating? Or,
Yeah. I would say this movie for me, because we're doing a 5 Night Mothers out of 5 Night Mothers system, right?
mhm.
I'm gonna say for this movie, I'm
You
gonna give
came
this
up
a
with the
five.
Night Mothers.
I'm gonna do a 5 Night Mothers. Five
I would agree.
five rats in a cage or night mothers, however we want to do it. If we want to keep it consistent with our like show, we
Just,
can call it rats in a cage.
we already started with Night Mothers. We could just continue.
Yeah, I'm 5 out of 5. This movie is if you want to watch a, I don't know that age. Is it a classic? Is it considered a classic? I would say it's a classic.
I would say it's a cult classic anyway.
Yeah, I would say if you want to watch a horror movie classic, this is the movie to watch. And it's certainly, I don't think anyone could say this movie is not worth your time unless they're not a horror fan.
Oh, exactly. And the people who say that they can't, that they don't like the movie are just people who like, they like just kind of the blockbuster horror type of movies,
Yeah.
which who knows. But maybe we should change the rating system to fit the movie. So we'll use puzzle boxes this time.
5 out of
Five.
5 pins.
That's what I thought of first. I thought, no, that's lame. So we'll go with pins it is.
So yeah, all around good movie, highly recommends. And the Hellraiser, so Hellbound colon Hellraiser 2. I keep saying it that way because it's like I just hate how this one is like named so different, and then you get later on in like the naming and the numbering. There's not. It makes no sense.
Yeah, the newest one didn't even have a number, did it?
No, it didn't. That's just par for the course for that movie. It was
Yeah.
okay. Anyway, we're getting ahead of
It's
ourselves.
like the Rambo movie just called Rambo, but it's like the fourth or fifth one.
Hellraiser 2 Electric Boogaloo, if you will. This
I want to
so
play Honey Heist.
actually, my partner is playing Honey Heist right now.
Oh my-
Yeah, it's so weird that you just said that. So yes, let me find in my notes because I took some high level notes here. Okay. So Hellraiser 2. This takes place in the asylum that Kirsty is in after the events of the first movie.
Understandably.
Yes, who wouldn't be, going to have to go to an asylum because nobody would believe you. It sets up some pretty key people. The head doctor at the asylum is knowledgeable about all this crud, trying to do this. He brings the mattress that Julia died on a mattress in the house. She was taken away by the Cenobites.
Trenard, I believe his name is.
Trenard, yeah. And he brings this mattress in and purposefully brings Julia back. They have a young lady, and what's this girl's name? The girl who solves the puzzle box? Forgotten.
Luckily, I have everything pulled up. Tiffany?
Tiffany.
Yeah, played by Imogen Foreman.
They have.
Who looks a lot like Kirsty, I should say.
You think so?
Like, facial structure wise.
I'll have to look back at that because I don't know. So Tiffany does the box. I don't know. Can they not open it? I don't understand why Tiffany had to do it.
I'm not sure either. I think they just didn't want, because, hold on, let me get back into my Hellraiser lore here. like I said, for the last movie, whoever solves the box is directly responsible for the consequences of solving the box. So I believe they're using Tiffany more as a scapegoat than anything else.
And that didn't
Um,
work.
yeah, that, that's exactly right.
As they walk in, the Cenobites see right through this, um, and it transports everyone into this sort of this other realm. This is like the Cenobites' world. This is like hell, what have you. Um, it's you see a labyrinth as a part of this. You see a leviathan. You see some.
Yes.
This is just. I love this movie for the lore that it set up about all of this. Like, I got to get deeper into something that I was like, this is so interesting, and then I finally felt like it's like when you play a game and you get to get really deep in the DM's lore that they created, and you're like, yes, this is what I wanted.
Um, yeah, and this movie is the one that definitely sets up the majority of the lore that you get. When you look at the three Hellraiser movies that Clive Barker were a part of, you gotta just try and get as much lore out of them as you can, and the middle one definitely does it for you. Especially with Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we will get into that on our later part, I think.
So the doctor gets turned into a Cenobite, and during
Mhm.
all of this, they are trying to get through the labyrinth. The Kirsty wants to try to find her father, and this is such a tough. I feel like high leveling this one's tough because there's so much lore here to talk about. But they rip Julia's skin off. Kirsty wears Julia's skin, like, to trick the doctor in the end. Um, and then they somehow get out of the labyrinth. It's all kind of vague. You may have to fill in some blanks here for me because I'm like,
Yeah, so after she tricks Julia, there's this crazy scene where Frank shows back up. There's Kirsty and Julia, and they're
mm-hmm,
kind of in this sleeping area, I want to say, with these lit little candles.
mm-hmm.
Frank tries to kind of seduce Kirsty again in the creepy uncle way that he does in the first movie. Um,
Come to daddy, but you're my uncle.
uh, yeah. And it doesn't work. She ends up escaping from them.
Mm,
Um, and after her whole trick scene, she ends up being chased by another Cenobite, which is one of the first creature Cenobites that you see,
mm,
which is kind of like a weird dog thing.
mm, mm,
Um, and so she gets chased out of that as she makes her way out of the labyrinth, and as she goes back into her room at the asylum as the walls are closing, and it kind of traps
mm,
the creature on the other side as she has the puzzle box.
mm,
Having gotten it back, that kind of resets and frees her from the other side.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some specific, and I know I'm a stickler for the quotes in movies. This is the one where he says, "Your pain will be legendary even in hell." I believe this is the
Mhm.
movie where he says that. It's also the movie where she says, I want to see my father," and he says, "Your father is in his own hell, quite unreachable, quite unreachable." I thought, like, that was like the dopest, like, quote ever. Like, he's in his own hell and quite unreachable. Like, you just said that like a sir, like a just a such a like fancy way, but like truly what you're saying is like you're not gonna find him because he's in his own, he's suffering to death. He's suffering in his own hell. Like, you, like, I don't know. Anyway, it's just like
Yeah.
Pinhead has probably some of the coolest one-liners of any villain in any horror
Yes.
movie.
Not just villain, just anyone. Like, he's the only character in a film that I'll excuse one-liners of.
Yeah.
Except maybe, I guess, Arnold Schwarzenegger in certain movies. but but he Pinhead always has perfect lines. And his quote about her father also kind of portrays how deep this realm they're in actually is.
Mm,
And the doctor, when he's operating on a brain at another point, talks about the brain being like a labyrinth, like puzzles.
mm,
And so it sets up more of that lore that everything is connected to that puzzle box in a way that everything underneath is its own puzzle and its own layers. Um, and I think that's what he was also hinting at with that comment about her dad.
Yeah, I think my favorite parts have to be some of those quotes. This movie, my favorite part also is they're sort of they're being reminded of their humanness. The Cenobites being reminded that they were human at some point, and you getting to see who these horrible monsters are.
Mhm.
That I loved. I loved that part of it. That has to be my favorite, one of my favorite scenes. I also like the Leviathan a lot. I really like the Leviathan.
The Leviathan is awesome and is probably the most key character in this whole film to set up the lore on.
Did you have any additional favorite pieces that we can gush
Mm,
over?
let's see. No, I think you talked about the best ones.
I like this movie a lot.
I like this one too.
I know, like I don't want to say it was, because the original, you're like, always the original is like the best. This is one of those movies where a rare horror movie where the sequel was like, I mean, almost as good or as good as the first one.
No, definitely. Um, I would say probably just as good, if
Hmm.
not like an extra pin, like a little rested half of a pin,
Yeah.
just because of the extra lore that it gives you. If they were able to put this lore into the first movie, I think the first movie would have been just perfect in all ways. Um, but I guess it wouldn't have been true to what it was based off of if they did that. Um,
Yeah.
but no,
So it
is
was.
there anything you didn't like about this one?
I don't know. I don't know if there was. I didn't care for the "come to daddy" line in the first one either. So I guess if I had
Yeah,
to pick a least favorite part, it would have to be that line, just
Frank
because
just
that line squeaks me out. I never in my life have been able to call a male partner daddy. I've never been able to do that. I, I can't. I have a decent relationship with my father. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. And no judgment to anybody who
I just
does. It's just not me.
I
Not my thing.
I just think that Frank as a character in both films and in the novel just makes me feel gross just as a character,
Yeah,
just
that's
all
fair.
around. So even if he's not speaking, it's just his whole demeanor just makes it. Uh.
Ugh.
So that's my least favorite part. Frank is in the movie.
So we have talked. We've kind of like stepped into the additions to lore here,
Mhm.
and I know we're already getting close to time here. Like we're already past the 10 o'clock mark anyway, because my stupid dealing with figuring out Streamlabs and all that stuff. But we talked about the labyrinth. We've talked about the addition of new Cenobites. We've talked about the Leviathan. We've talked about the box. We haven't. Oh, and that's one we haven't talked about. How the box changes.
Yes, it does. Um, the box, it changes in the sense that it has configuration set up that can shift, though it can't fully change in a way that maybe you should explain it. My brain is skipping on me.
It changes to a shape that would apparently. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense from a geometrical
Yeah, see,
perspective that it would change, but it doesn't change into like a key or like a totem or something. It doesn't change into something that would be like a different object. You can still tell based on the markings that it's probably the box.
hmm,
Um, but yeah, it's used basically. It is used basically as like a key, right?
yeah,
Was
for
the
the
intent
most
of it?
part. Um, which is strange for the lore that you get later on,
Hmm.
because it seems to be forgotten a little bit. Uh, that that is the way that it works.
Hmm.
But it does appear to be able to shift that way. And it's also kind of the sense that there's no point. I don't think there's any good connection point for the second book,
Hmm.
in the lore that it gives.
Hmm.
But in that book, it kind of you get the sense that once the Cenobites themselves have the puzzle box, they're able to utilize that key function to get more power for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the whole theme of the Scarlet Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's kind of the whole point of setting it up in this one was to add the additional lore and be able to give Kirsty a way to escape while also setting up these additional um, links for us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that changing up the box, because we can see that it changes shape, changing the shape additionally in a different way, it made sense, and it certainly did add utility. Um, and thinking about other things that there are people experience their own personal hells here. It's not a one size fits all experience. You know, you have it your way.
It's literally like what they desired when they completed that box and then
Mm-hmm.
taken to whatever the extreme punishment seems to be.
Mm-hmm. It's like
Um,
a Burger King. It's like, can have it your way or whatever.
but
That's
at
the
this
Burger King
at the
theme.
same
Theme.
time, they add this Leviathan character who seems to be, if not in control of the entire thing, at least like overseeing the
Mm-hmm.
entire thing. And it's just kind of this amalgamation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you want to talk, what were your thoughts on Leviathan?
Um, I liked it was basically using the Doctor as like an appendage. Like that's kind of what it was doing, right? I mean, it's just like it seemed like it was just like he was like attached to a tentacle, basically.
Pretty much in a really body horror gross way that reminds me of The Void.
I love it. I love body horror. It's my favorite type of horror. Cosmic
Oh,
horror
this
and body horror, like,
yeah, at the scene where Julia kisses him.
oh,
Oh,
it's just, the Doctor is a really actually interesting, incredibly interesting looking character. He also he very much is reminiscent of Pinhead, the way his head is cut and things like that. He's not that I'm not gonna say it. He's not the last time we see a Cenobite that's kind of modeled after Pinhead.
yeah. Um, it's interesting, and I wonder if it's because of his fascination with Pinhead. And looking back, so I pulled up Leviathan here.
Mm.
So looking back on Leviathan as well, it has a lot of the same markings that the Lamentation configuration
Mm.
does. Um, and that's something that I don't know that they give much lore to. Does
Mm-mm.
do you recall the Doctor talking about it?
Mm-mm. No, I think Julia said that she worshipped it when it's
Yeah.
revealed.
So it looks like it must be connected to one of the comics I haven't read because looking through it here, people who can't see what we're looking at, there's an image here of Leviathan in a different setting,
Mm.
um, sitting somewhere above the labyrinth, which I will link you.
I gotta get my hands on these comics.
Yes, they really deepen the lore. I linked it to you. So you can see there that the Leviathan used to not have the same lamentation markings upon it.
Uh huh.
So that kind of leads me to believe it's corrupted in some way compared to what this image is. And the image is just that the Leviathan is basically gold with a cross carved into it,
Oh.
from what it looks like. Um, but it is interesting in the weird, gooey worm way that it uses the Doctor.
Yeah,
He is probably
definitely.
one of the cooler Cenobites.
I agree with that. Basically, the Leviathan kind of controlling him. He's pitting himself against the Cenobites that and gonna defeat them. You know, it's basically like what you're seeing here with this Leviathan. So you're getting this idea that it sort of imbued him with some sort of power that they don't really have.
It definitely gives the sense that Clive Barker set up kind of additional lore that
Mm-hmm.
you get more in his other books outside of the series.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I could explain here, which will make more sense for as we go through
Mm-hmm.
later. There's definitely like a hierarchy of hell
Mm-hmm.
for Clive Barker's setup. So, in most likelihood, the Leviathan is portrayed as something higher up in their hierarchy than the Cenobites or the priests, as they're referred to later on, are in the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you get some of that in the Gospels.
Yeah, I really, for that, really appreciated the Scarlet Gospels and that addition to lore. So I mean, we could probably go on forever for the because this movie is just chock full of lore, and we're probably missing huge pieces just because we're like fan gushing here. But let's talk rating. I know we kind of touched on this already. I'm gonna say 5 out of 5 again. Again.
Again, you're straight five?
Just 5 out of 5. I know you want to
Okay.
add that extra half pin there. I'm a stickler for rules, so I got to keep it in the 5 plus 5, 5 out of 5. But you can add the 0.5 on your end.
No, I'll keep it five. I'll hammer in the five.
I like this movie a lot. I highly recommend. If you watch the first movie, you like the first movie, you want to get some more lore, you want to see some more of the hellscape that is the world that, these Cenobites come from, hell, when whatever, it's a whole thing. But you should watch it, do it if that's interesting to you. If it's not interesting to you, you might just enjoy seeing some of your favorite characters you like from the first one again.
I highly recommend it. Regardless, pay close attention to the Doctor. He has a lot of good lines in this movie.
Yeah.
Usually it's just Pinhead. Doctor has some great lines in this movie. So I highly recommend it. 5 pins out of 5. That's it. That one.
So, the next movie, Hell on Earth, it's Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say I hated it, because one of the we'll get there. So, high level plot of this one is, at the end of Hellraiser 2, you see this sort of pillar thing that comes up out of this sort of portal from hell, and it's like the Cenobites are attached to it. Some important things that happen in the second one to highlight, to kind of pull into this third one, is that the Cenobites are reminded that they were human once. That's key for the third movie. It's a key plot point.
It's the most key plot point in this one. They really try to emphasize it as much as possible, it seems.
Yeah. So basically, high level, our final girl in this movie is a reporter. She's got a name that was, I didn't realize that people. What was it?
Joey Summerskill.
Joey. I've never encountered a woman named Joey, especially in a movie that's this old, where it's okay, just gender neutral names, whatever, or gendered names, whatever. I don't care. You call yourself whatever you call yourself Frank, and you could say come to daddy if that's what you wanted to do. But I would not judge you for that. But all I'm saying is Joey's not a typical
You already
woman.
did judge. You did judge Frank for that.
Don't say it to me, Frank. You could say it to anyone else on the planet, but don't say it to me. I don't like that. But yeah, so Joey, is a reporter. Her father died before she was born. Something like that?
Yes.
And he died in war. Was it Vietnam or something? Or the
I think
Korean
so.
War?
It was one of those two.
And she's trying to find out more about him, and understand this box has kind of come along as something that she's on her radar as a reporter. We have this bar owner guy. What was his name?
Hold on.
I'm quizzing you.
Is that what's happening?
He
I was making sure I was following the plot points that time. I didn't.
he has what's basically this. It looks like this leather bar. It's they have what's your flair, kind of it's a club. People probably have sex a lot in this club.
You're talking about the main character, the JP Monroe guy?
Yeah, the guy who has the tower now.
Oh yeah, JP Monroe.
JP Monroe, he has this tower now, and he has a girl that gets too close to it, and then that they Pinhead takes her or something, or one of the things in the thing takes her and kills her, or something like that.
Pinhead is trapped inside of that weird thing. So if you get too close, pretty much just takes you. It makes you part of it.
Right.
It's what's that game that we were talking about with the big ball you roll around? And stuff gets stuck to it. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Katamari, yeah.
Katamari. Yeah. It's like the body horror Katamari.
I was Lawn bowling? I know where you're going with that.
It's kind of like lawn bowling, I guess, on a planet-sized scale.
And you're sticky.
Oh, gross.
Oh, we crack each other up like this. Um, so yeah, then this pillar, it's reminiscent of the pillar from the second movie. It doesn't look the same though. And I didn't get a movie reason why it didn't look the same as the previous one.
It's probably was just cost reasons more than anything. The whole movie kind of has that portrayal of lower scale in a kind of way. Things go from it seems like I always forget the word for the effects that aren't CGI, practical
Practical.
effects.
Hmm.
It seems like the quality of the practical effects were a little bit less in this one, and got the more rubbery, chunky vibe to them that, that you see in like Ninja Turtle monsters. I didn't like this movie, Marlo.
Eh, eh. The this so this you get this really crazy scene. You have a bar scene. I'm just trying to keep it very high level. Um, you have this crazy bar scene where the Pinhead is turning people into Cenobites and pulling them in with hooks and chains and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, you have Joey doing her whole thing. She encounters human Pinhead's human side in a dream.
Yes.
Is that is it? It was
It's kind of like a fever dream of a kind of vision
yeah.
of him back in his military days. Uh, Captain Elliot Spencer is who Pinhead is. He's a World War II veteran who discovered the box and to find the adrenaline rush of war and experience those things again. And strangely, it didn't make him. I think that's the correct story for him.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and strangely, it didn't make him. It didn't just kill him; it turned him into a Cenobite, which had turned him into Pinhead.
Hmm.
Um, each pin had a meaning, I believe,
Hmm. I think
but I don't
yeah.
recall what they were.
So the interesting thing about him is his story is highly like Frank's story, but as a
Hmm.
human, he's not creepy.
No, he,
He
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 he's who Frank
admits,
should have been.
yeah,
Like,
he admits that he had some desires that were not normal in the terms of what normal society people would think is normal. Um, we do not kink shame here on the Nightmare, so you know that.
no, we
But
do not.
but he admits this and says that he's basically on the same mission that so many people who this box has has annihilated. He was on that mission, but he didn't come off as that sort of creepy uncle come to daddy thing.
No, and the interesting thing about Pinhead in general is that you kind of learn that he wants to be human again.
Mhm.
In spite of everything that he's portrayed in the past two movies, he wants to be human again. Which is kind of a jarring effect to give Pinhead some humanity. Um, but it's definitely portrayed, and they try to develop a connection between the two of them by allowing Joey to see the vision of him as Elliot Spencer.
Right, and the whole plot of this is the thing that Pinhead is when he's separated from his human side is much worse because there's no humanity to him. So we see through this that Joey basically goes through all of this to bring the box back to the human side and bring together Pinhead and Spencer. What was it,
Hmm?
Elliot Spencer?
Yep, Elliot Spencer.
To bring them back together so that they can merge themselves back into one. And this happens successfully. So that's like mission accomplished. Um, that's really high level what this movie is. As far as this movie goes, if you're talking about movies that you would really want to get in depth and talk about, I don't really know that this is the one.
No.
There's not a lot of lore. There is some lore added to this movie, and I did appreciate that, like the separation of the person from the Cenobite. I did like that. I did like the give me the box thing. You know, I want the Cenobite wants the box thing. That was a cool
Yeah.
addition to lore. Um, I don't know.
That's, I feel like it at the same time kind of had, mm, it kind of altered lore in a strange way because you see the way that Elliot Spencer became a Cenobite. You
Mm.
see what happened to Frank. But then if you look at the Cenobites that are created by Pinhead himself, they just kind of represent the jobs that they were doing in life, which doesn't really mesh with what they're portraying Cenobites to be. If they're just the darkest parts of someone, does that mean that the darkest parts of us are the jobs that we do? I
I,
mean, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
But
because it's not like Pinhead created nails or something like that. Like he was a nail maker, so we drove nails
right,
into his head. It's not like it's just it doesn't make any it does it in that and of itself doesn't make any sense to me. That what decides who you create, like what determines that, and would not Frank have been a better Cenobite than the bartender at this bar?
exactly. They could have just well, I mean, Clive Barker was on his way out, obviously,
Mm.
but if I was backseat writing, which is not something I like to do, I would say just take out all the other Cenobites and have Frank come back as his own Cenobite, like you were saying, and
Hmm.
Pinhead and Frank have this whole dynamic that this Joey character has to stop. Even that would have worked out.
Well,
But go ahead.
was wondering because you know how Pinhead separated from his human side when the other Cenobites separated from their human side. Did they continue to keep their Cenobite thing, and that's why he had to make more because he didn't have any friends anymore?
I don't know. Because later on, like in the books, in the second book, he's portrayed as just like hating everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And it's, this movie also, I looked up. Joey's father died in Vietnam. You're
Okay.
right. Um, this movie also kind of sets up Pinhead in a strange way that I believe it was the third Nightmare on Elm Street set up Freddy, where he went from Nightmare Hunter to Slasher, the one where he like possesses the kid and like kills everyone and then just shows up at the pool party. That the whole club scene here kind of had that same vibe to me. Like it was a sudden shift in what Pinhead was.
Yes, I agree with you, but I will also say that that scene was brutal.
Oh, for sure.
And for that, I liked it. But did it fit? Absolutely not. It was one of my favorite parts with the, like, I put an asterisk by it. It's my favorite, but it doesn't belong here, asterisk.
I got you. I
But
got
my
you.
truly favorite was getting the talking with Elliot Spencer, talking with him and getting down to like figuring out who he was and why he was. Um,
Definitely.
Favorite parts.
I think the whole transformation of Elliot Spencer probably is my favorite part as well. It's the first time that you get in depth with one of the Cenobites to see who they really are.
Mm,
I guess in The Doctor, in a certain way, you do,
mm,
but they don't portray that separation in the second movie. The Doctor seems kind of menacing and intentional the entire time in becoming one of these things.
right.
Um, and with that, you would think that it's something that they wouldn't support the Doctor becoming. Um, but in a strange way, it makes you kind of sympathize Pinhead more.
Right. Right.
But
It
yeah,
makes him more human, which is, I mean, that's the point. You know, that's the whole point
mm,
of it, quite obviously. But I like that a lot. I don't know. I don't know about least favorite parts about this movie. I didn't. I hated that J.P.
more
Monroe.
Monroe. Yes,
Yeah.
JP Morgan's the jeweler. Yeah, JP Monroe is the Frank of this movie. I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
same feeling, same gross feeling.
Yeah.
Um, But uh, yeah, I like how we went from least favorite parts to just least favorite person in the film.
Yeah, I don't know if I had like a.
I mean, if at least favorite part, I think it would be just the dynamic shift that that club did for me. Even though it's a
Yeah,
brutal scene, the way it's
yeah,
sealed out of place, where you give it your asterisks, I give it a cross through.
yeah. Yeah, I feel
Um,
that. That maybe in that maybe how is that like a favorite and a least favorite? Like it's a
yeah,
brutal scene and it was really cool to watch, but it didn't belong there. It just felt like it gave me that gore that I wanted, that I always want all the time when I watch horror movies, but it wasn't didn't need to be. It wasn't there was no it made no sense. I didn't like the scene where all the Cenobites were circling around Joey. I
yeah.
didn't care for that scene either.
No, knowing Clive Barker's writing style, it makes it even more awkward. But um, we did not talk about the kind of problematic crucifixion scene where he removes the pins from his head, stabs his hands.
Oh
If
yeah.
we want to talk about that,
Can you describe that one, because I am.
it relates back to your favorite scene in the first one about Jesus wept.
Oh yeah.
And this one, um, Pinhead basically removes, they're in the church. He removes some pins from his head and stabs them from his hand, through his hands, and then holds out his hand. I believe he says, "I am the way,"
Yeah.
in a very,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't like that. I'm not a religious person. I'm an atheist. Um but that was
That's why
just
I asked if you wanted to talk about it because it's kind of a problematic scene. It seems,
it didn't occur to me that it was problematic. It just occurred to me that it was kind of corny
yeah,
when I watched it.
it was like a poor satire.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, okay, come
But it
on.
was interesting that it seemed like he was trying to connect it back to the same kind of feeling he got from that Jesus movie. It just didn't hit the right note.
Yeah, and so the parallel I think here is like, you're giving someone the ultimate pleasure and comparing that to the savior. I'm trying to make a connection. I don't know. The
I don't
ultimate,
know.
giving you the ultimate of something. I'm saving you, but I'm
I
taking you to hell.
mean,
You're going to live in your own personal hell forever. So that's exactly the opposite of what Jesus did.
has anyone ever just been like, "Oh yeah, this is cool"? Maybe they don't go to hell. Like if people who don't who who don't have Frank's reaction are like, "This is too much, explode me." Like maybe those people get saved from it. Who knows?
I
The
don't
heart, the
know. We were
heart,
making Cenobites out of some of them. Maybe we let some of them go. I don't know.
the most, only the most metal ones.
You have the true soul of a metal god. You get out of hell. So, yeah, and then we talk about additions to lore in this one. We've already kind of
It's
covered
sinking.
that. Like, I think we just like the additions to lore that it gave. Some were good, and some were just like, what? Why
Yeah,
though?
really, the only good addition was Elliot Spencer.
Right.
Um, Outside of that, I feel like he didn't really care as much about the third one as he did the first two.
Yeah.
And I guess next time when we start talking about four, five, and six, we'll really get into that and how the people who took over afterwards just kind of went all willy-nilly with it.
Yeah. So, rating on this one, I would say I would have given. Okay, I'm going to say 3 out of 5. And I'm only giving it that much because of Elliot Spencer.
Yep, that's what I was going to say too.
And I liked the gore. The gore gave me the good feels. I love the gore. It's some of my favorite parts in horror movies. It just didn't belong there.
That's going to be in an FBI report one day.
Hey, hey, quote me. So
I
final.
mean, that is the best part of the movies.
I mean, I'm just a horror fan and a writer, so what you can't look at
Yeah,
my search history.
No,
I mean, you
not
can, but
ever.
it's not going to be indicative of my actual nature in society.
Yeah. So Amazon shopping lists. That's how they get all that information, man. Why'd
What
you
was
buy
that
so many
ad the other
knives?
day? Do you remember that ad? I was like, what in the hell is this advertising to me?
Yeah, the the one woman like for seven husbands or
Yeah,
something like that. I believe it was.
I don't know what that
It
was.
popped up on your D Live and you asked me about it. Like I knew you personalized it.
It was weird. I'm gonna have to find it again. So final thoughts. First three films. Final thoughts on. Is there anything you can think of that you'd like to add to the discussion about these first three movies?
Um, let's see. The third movie shouldn't have been made. They should have added the Elliot Spencer scene to the second movie. That's what I gotta say.
I will give you that. I liked. I would tell someone to watch the third movie so they could watch the fourth movie. You don't have
That's
to
true.
watch the fourth movie. You could skip the third, but I think for my mindset, it's hard for me to skip something like that.
Oh, definitely. It's kind of like saying you're gonna watch the Blade movies and not watch it, having to watch the third one, which sucks, but you still watch it.
You're gonna watch them all. You gotta watch them all.
Yeah.
Um,
The fourth one is Bloodline, right?
yes,
Okay.
I liked
Um,
Bloodline, but we will
I
get
also
to that
like
next week.
Bloodline. So next week we are doing 4, 5, and 6. But my final thoughts on these for reals are: if you are a horror fan, definitely watch the first movie. I'll tell you everything you need to know about the other two movies. If you like the body horror, if you like the subtext that goes on, if you like the slow sneak peek world building, definitely move on and watch the other two movies. If you don't like those things, I don't recommend continuing on in the series because it's a 10 movie long series and two books and a bunch of comic books, and you're going to regret your whole life. So,
Absolutely. I agree with that statement. I think if you're wild fan like us, certainly if you're someone who likes this type of genre, this is a franchise that I think you should watch. It's a pretty key horror movie franchise, and it's worth watching at least these first three. Um, I'm gonna tell you, spoiler alert, it's worth watching four as well, in my opinion. But after that, you could stop.
yeah, you could just pretend the other ones don't exist. That's what I do.
And
Yeah.
if you hang out with us same time next week, we're gonna talk about those, and we're probably gonna rag on them, and it's probably gonna be fun.
Oh, for sure.
So all of that to
Especially
say,
that one.
and then we'll get into and then it'll just be the shit show of the one after that for those last ones, because I think we can finish those up,
Yeah.
and just no, honey, no. I will say, well, we can talk about this off stream, but I will say the last one had some parts I did like.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but all that to say, we are so happy you joined us today, and I am glad to be here,
I
Sam.
am too.
I'm so this is like the highlight of my week, getting to talk about horror movies, whether they were good or shitty. And the shitty ones are almost like I may not enjoy watching them, but I enjoy shitting on them. So
Oh, for sure. We got to start going like way back and just be like, we're gonna watch the shittiest horror movie made in this decade.
I like the kind of like shot in the dark we take with newer movies, because like
Hmm.
so many, like, we know we're not picking like cult classics or like
Oh,
classics. Um,
that's true. I mean, we did pick like a whole series of cult classic mix, but next time,
next time.
we're gonna pick some random ass Prime Video movie you don't even know.
So stick with us. if we can make it, we'll be here. We're 100% trying. Life is pretty crummy right now for most people, and if you are having trouble, get in touch with some help and get it where you need it. But we're all struggling, and I'll be honest with you, I'm dealing with a lot of stress on my own side. So if we're not here next week, we are planning to be here. If we're not here next week for some whatever reason, we love you and we hope that you watch some Hellraiser movies. All of that to say, I think we're gonna shut this down. Thanks for hanging with us. Thanks for chilling, and thanks for talking. And Sam, as always, I just love our conversations.
Well,
We just have the best conversations.
it's getting too deep, Marla. Too deep. It's too deep for the end of the stream.
But thanks everybody, and we are gonna head out. Much love.